Welcome into the Bucknuts Roundtable, Bucknutters. I'm happy to be joined today by Bill Kurelic and Duane Long. Gentlemen, we figured it was necessary for another recruiting roundtable given the events of the last few days. Bill, you were on hand in Columbus both Sunday for the Nike football training camp and then again at the Elite 11 last night. I know most people who frequent the site and would be willing to listen to this podcast probably are up to speed, but kind of give us a Cliff Notes version of what you were able to witness in your 48 hours of nonstop work.
Well, first, I would say I witnessed a great recruiting weekend for Ohio State. Ohio State's certainly fortunate to have that on their campus and get all those great players coming to Columbus, Ohio, and getting on campus. Now, they can't visit Ohio State during the camp, but the fact that they're on campus, so many great players that I saw, some of them working out, some of them not working out. But the point was they were at Ohio State over the weekend, and that's great. Certainly a lot of energy and a boost to Ohio State's recruiting efforts. It started last week with Joe Burrow committing to Ohio State, but then getting all those guys on campus and the vibe that came out of the weekend, Justin Hilliard, Damian Harris, Jayshon Cornell, now looking like a very, very realistic possibility to be a Buckeye. I just came out of the weekend with a great vibe as far as Ohio State goes and the recruiting efforts for 2015.
Duane, how about yourself? I can tell you just for me personally, the highlight was reading, one of the highlights was reading the story about Justin Hilliard and his change to his schedule, and now he wants to be the rainmaker for his class. What did you see that really jumped out to you from the weekend?
Well, just that this kid that is so important, the Buckeyes need to look back. Jordan Hicks never had the career that we thought he would have. Solid but not spectacular kid. But look at Trey DePriest. We missed him.
Sure.
You got to keep the guys. You can't lose those really special talents. When Alabama comes all the way to Ohio to try to get a linebacker, that says a lot. You can't lose those guys. And here we have another one that is a really special talent. I'm telling you, he's one of the 5 or 6 best I've seen in the state of Ohio and all the years I've been doing this. And to turn this around, I think it says a lot about this staff that a guy that, they were talking more about Notre Dame, Iowa, even Michigan. And now when he's been around here several times recently. Haven't seen his name associated with other schools as much, but he's been around here. He's said some things on Twitter that make you think he's really intrigued. And then after a good bit of contact with the Buckeye staff, he's talking about moving up his commitment. That, I think, is huge. And he appears to be one of those guys that is going to be, as soon as he hangs up the phone from committing, he's going to be on the phone talking to other players that can help this class. So it's just that right there. Love getting in on Cornell. Love that Damian Harris is saying the right things. But the one that really stands out for me is with Hilliard, just looking like he's going to be a Buckeye sooner rather than later.
Bill, 2 of those calls Hilliard will make real quickly will obviously be to Cornell and Harris. Just following what I did of them on Twitter and what you guys are writing about, it sounds like there's hitting it off and then there's hitting it off. It sounds like these guys really have developed a decent bond, and I do believe that means more these days with social media and the way these guys get to interact with each other. With Hilliard, that's such a change of heart. Did you get the sense that was a regurgitation of maybe Urban Meyer's pitch to him to be the rainmaker, or do you think Hilliard has just been enamored with Ohio State as we've moved along here?
I think it really comes from Justin really thinking about things. In fact, I talked with him a little bit about this, that he just felt like after he thought about things that he wants to be a leader. He wants to bring to whatever school he picked, help bring a great class with him to that school. He mentioned in particular, you talked about Jayshon Cornell. He mentioned how, he's going to make a decision in all likelihood before Cornell, and then he would like to help recruit Cornell, as Justin put it, to keep those linemen or keep those blockers off of him. They have developed a relationship, and rather quickly, I would say, as you mentioned. But I think Justin just came to the realization that, hey, I can be part of something special. As he put it, I don't want to be selfish. I want to help bring as many other great prospects to the school I pick. And boy, I've talked to Dustin many times in person and the phone and everything else, and the longer this goes on, the better and better vibe I'm getting from him when it comes to Ohio State.
Yeah, one last thing on Hilliard. I thought it was kind of interesting that if you read his story and match up when he plans to make his announcement and his visit date, I mean, it certainly sounds like he's going to Ohio State. So let's say they do get Justin Hilliard, Duane. You're talking about a possibility of having at linebacker Justin Hilliard at one outside linebacker, who was the number one outside linebacker in 247 Sports, Raekwon McMillan on the inside, who last year was the number one inside linebacker, and Dante Booker on the outside, who last year was the number one outside linebacker. So it certainly seems that they won't be needing to move a fullback to linebacker anymore, Duane.
It does. You know, we got so used to great linebacker play, not good linebacker play, solid linebacker play. We got spoiled. When you look at just go back. I mean, you got number one draft choices going back for how many years? Guys still banging around the NFL. James Laurinaitis has had a better pro career than A.J. Hawk has. So we got so used to just being so much better than everybody at linebacker, and then we've had a couple of the leanest years where linebacker, we would have been happy to be solid. We weren't. We were really not very good at linebacker. Well, one thing you look at, all the guys that left who would have been. Dorian Bell is a guy who would have had a great impact here. He messed up, got himself thrown out of school. And the injuries, things like that just really depleted the linebacker core to such a degree that the talent just wasn't there. These were not great guys. Now, the last couple of classes, we started to see it come again. Last year's class, I think Hubbard could be the prototype for linebacker, a strong side linebacker. When you're trying to cover a tight end, you got two situations, when you do want to do some man coverage, neither one of them are appealing. You've got a linebacker that can't run with a tight end or a safety who cannot match up physically with him. When you've got a 6'6", 230-pound kid, he's linebacker size, he's going to be as fast, and he's played safety, so he's real comfortable out there in space trying to cover. I think he's going to be great. Kyle Berger, this is just a whole nother level of linebackers. And then you come back this year with Hilliard. I mean, this is just the next step. This is what you got to do. Let's keep these guys that you got to have difference makers at those positions, especially when you got an in-state guy. You can't let national talents in your home state leave. You just can't. You're just not going to be a good football program when you're trying. It's so much harder to recruit outside of the state. You got to get the guys that rate your program that are in the state. You got to get them, and I love how this one's trending, and he's a really unique player.
Bill, when all is said and done, how do you see the class of 2015 finishing when it comes to linebackers? How many will they take, and who do you think they'll be?
Well, I expect if they can get them, they'll take at least two great ones and probably three. Yeah, they absolutely want to land Justin Hilliard, obvious, and right now it's trending that way. They certainly want to keep Jerome Baker in state. Now, he can be spotted, though, as an athlete or running back, but he does prefer linebacker slightly. And then Shamar Kilby-Lane out of Florida. I cannot see them turning down any of those three. They're just too good. And, boy, if you put those three linebackers together in this Ohio State class, coupled with the four that they got last year, as Duane mentioned.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, where would that rank in history, Bill, since you've seen Ohio State recruiting?
If it happened, I could not say that in my almost 30 years I can remember back-to-back groups of that many, 7 in this case, linebackers going to Ohio State. It would just be it puts away all the talk about the linebacker talent not being up to par at Ohio State. It would be a tremendous coup for Urban Meyer.
Bill, I want to come back to you first on this, and then, Duane, you can jump in. I want to talk a little bit about running back recruiting because I think that crystallized a little bit this weekend. You've got the names out there, Damian Harris, Michael Weber, Larry Scott. I think Nyheim Hines is a name that's exploded recently. Take us to who you think will end up in the class, Bill, and why, and who caught your eye this weekend.
Well, my feeling right now is Damian Harris ends up at Ohio State. In fact, I feel pretty strongly that Ohio State is the school to beat right now. And by the way, I'll be having a video interview on the site in the next 24 hours on Damian Harris, and I think people will be a little bit surprised. A kid of that ilk, the number one running back in the country, arguably, a 5-star kid, just how humble that kid is. So I think it's something to watch for. The video interview I do with Damian Harris, very humble young man, well-spoken, and I think there's a pretty decent chance he's also going to be a Buckeye. So you start with Damian Harris. Then the question is, do they take another pure running back? And if so, can they get one? I think that they will take one if they can get, say, a Michael Weber, who right now has Ohio State at the top of his list. He told me that on Sunday. And then you've got Nyheim Hines that you brought up, but he doesn't fit into that group. They're recruiting him as, and people are going to hear this for maybe a millionth time, Percy Harvin type position, but they are recruiting him for that guy, the slot guy. So they definitely don't have Nyheim Hines in the same grouping as Damian Harris and Mike Weber.
Did Damian Harris pass the look test, Bill?
Yeah, now he's not I would say as people are comparing him to Carlos Hyde a little bit. In fact, on the video I do, he talks about that a little bit. I don't see him really as a Carlos Hyde type guy right now. I think he's a little bit different. He's not quite as big. Not quite as bulky, but he's a good-looking kid. And he did not work out, so I did not get to see him obviously run, but I've seen him on film, and boy, can he run.
Duane, running backs, who would you prefer, and how do you think it should break down? Let us know.
I love Harris on film. I mean, it looks like a video game, but that's what bothers me, Dan. I look at that Kentucky level of competition, and it makes me nervous. I was talking about it on the site this morning. I mentioned that looking at the 247 Sports top players in the state of Kentucky, he's obviously number one. The number two guy, his only offer is from Western Kentucky. It really bothers me, the level of competition he's going up against. I've been a big fan of LJ, Larry Scott, ever since I saw him. I'd take either one. But, you look at Harris and you think, okay, does the level of competition, the step up that he's going to run into here, does it make him better or does it overwhelm him? That's my big concern about him. The Carlos Hyde comparison, I guess I don't get that at all. I don't see the same kind of back. You got a bigger or taller, longer kind of guy. He's actually more like Zeke Elliott. He's just not the same kind of build. I mean, I was arguing with people back when Hyde came out. They were trying to put him at fullback. I said, no, he's not. He's a running back. No, I don't see that comparison. But it'd be hard to turn away from Harris, but I do love Scott. Love his how physical he is running a football. There's so much to like about him. Hines is a wingback, even though I like Bill's term there for fly guy. We got to find a name for him since we seem to be going to be calling this hybrid word is just too interchangeable. Don't like it there.
Sure.
Hines is a guy that I just don't see him as a running back type of body at the next level. And I think they would like to take two, because you don't know what's going to happen when the number two back is named. Does Dunn say, okay, I'm done at Ohio State? Does Ball say, well, I'm not going to play here? Who knows what's going to happen there? We may be losing two guys, not just Rod Smith. So we got to be careful about that. We may take two here. But either one, like I said, the only reason I'm not saying Harris is I'm just very concerned about that level of competition.
Yeah, it's definitely a concern, and we saw that with Rod Smith tearing it up in Indiana, and I thought he'd do a much better job here, and he never quite made the change. Okay, last night, Bill, the Elite 11 was really the first chance for everybody to see some kid from Athens, Ohio. I think his name is Joe Burrow. There's been some stories about him on the site. I don't know if you've seen him. What did you think of him in person? And give us kind of a wrap of what an Elite 11 camp is like at the WAC.
Well, I will start by saying that I watched Joe on Sunday at the Nike football training camp. I think a good way to put it would be that after I watched him on Sunday, I would have said he's somewhere between a slightly above average quarterback and a good quarterback. That's basically what I thought on Sunday. But then on Monday, I thought he was much better. I would change my ranking, so to speak, to somewhere between a good quarterback and a very good quarterback. I thought he threw the ball very well on Monday night. I thought he looked very confident on Monday night. Quick release. still is kind of growing into his body a little bit. He's a tiny bit gangly, I guess you'd say, but he's got the body. As he fills out and matures, I think this kid has a chance to be really good. And I know that the Ohio State staff, when I talk about quarterbacks, the staff basically is Tom Herman and Urban Meyer. I know they really like him, and they think he's got a chance to be a very good quarterback for the Buckeyes. And what I saw on Monday night, I would agree. I think he's got a chance to be an outstanding quarterback for Ohio State. As far as the rest of the camp, the guy that really stood out to me that I really liked was a name familiar with Ohio State fans, Lorenzo Nunez. I think he's going to be very good at South Carolina. I thought he threw the ball better than I expected. People talk about having his mechanics not being very good, and I didn't see that last night. I thought they were good. Running with the football, when he would sprint out and a couple sprints he did, he can take off. He's got some jets. So he's the guy that I really like. If Ohio State had gotten him earlier, I would have no problems with that either. That's for sure.
So what did you think of Danny Clark?
Danny Clark, the thing that impressed me most is the kid does not look like a freshman sophomore to be. I mean, he just physically, you would have never known if you'd have lined up all those kids. I think most people, if you didn't know what grade they were in, their ages, most people would have said Danny Clark would be an upperclassman, one of the older kids there. Physically, he looks good. Tall kid, a little bit lanky still, but physically, he's got a tremendous body potential. The thing he struggled with last night, on Monday night, was his accuracy. He just wasn't quite as accurate as he needed to be all the time throwing the ball. He tended to throw low, especially on the run. But, again, if you're going to do one or the other, throw low or throw high, you'd rather throw low. But he just wasn't quite as accurate last night as you would want him to be. But, again, he's only a freshman going on into his sophomore year. He's got plenty of time. I think he's got a chance to be an outstanding quarterback as well. And this could be interesting. Ohio State now has outstanding quarterbacks in their 2015 and 2017 class, and how difficult will that make it to get an outstanding one in their 2016 class? That'll be interesting to watch.
Duane, Clark and Burrow, your impressions?
Well, Clark, it's very interesting that Bill should bring up the accuracy issue. I saw him in a full game last year, and it was the one thing that it was the one negative that I could not get out of my mind. Threw into coverage a bit, but he's a freshman. He's playing at a very high level of competition as a freshman. And Northeast Ohio, there are no nights off up there. You're going to get it every weekend. So I was ready to write that off, but his accuracy is still a concern. Good arm strength. I like the feet on a kid that young, that size. Moves around really well in the pocket. He's not a guy who's going to break you down and break off a 60-yard run, but I liked his feet in the pocket. He was able to move around, set up, get his feet under him, and throw on the move. I really liked his mechanics. Arm strength there, big kid, moves around just fine as far as being able to be a threat with his legs. It's just he's got to get his accuracy down. I'm not that worried about it at this stage. He's just so young. And, playing as a true freshman at a place like Massillon, that's insane. That quarterback. So the talent is there. He's just got to get it. He's got to hone it. And he's got plenty of time to do that. Burrow, it's really just a level of competition matter again. He's South Central, Southeast Ohio is a dead zone for football. Not much going on down there. You don't see many players going to big schools. I can't remember the last one, actually. That's my big concern with him. He does everything so very well. He runs the ball. I saw some people complaining about his running. I said, look, you're too used to watching Braxton Miller. This kid moves around just fine. He's going to, some were saying, well, as long as he can get me a first down, he can get you more than the first down. He can make something happen. That's not a concern. Again, the level of competition really, that's my big concern, and I love what Bill was saying, that how well he threw. with some receivers that could make plays for him against some defensive backs that he's going to run into in college, and he was still making good throws out there. That's huge as far as I'm concerned.
All right, Duane, I'm coming back to you here. We talked about this before the show, talked about it over the weekend. In our last Ask the Staff, LV Hawks 25 asked a question that's better suited for a roundtable given the girth of the response, and I will read his question and you can handle it. So how would you break down the current quarterback commits and targets, both style and talent-wise? Who do they compare to? Pryor, Miller, Beckman, or Smith, or say even recent quarterbacks from other schools if it's a better comparison. He'd like a breakdown of Clark, Burrow, and Gibson. He wants to know if they have Pryor-like talent. Is Gibson Cam Newton-ish or Braxton? He just wants to get a better feel for their talent level. So Clark, Burrow, and Gibson, if you've got some comparisons for them of guys you've seen recently.
Well, Gibson, he really does compare. He's not as big as Pryor, but just, put a guy out there, an athlete out there, you're going to give Pryor the edge because Pryor was 6'5" or 6'6", 225, 230 pounds, and was still running 4.4s. He was just an incredible athlete at that size. But, when you talk about as passers, I think they're right about the same level. I'm not yet convinced that Gibson is a college quarterback. As a freshman, I saw him, I said, no way. As a sophomore, I said, doubtful. Last year's, he's a little better, but still not there. He's got to get better as a senior to really show me that he can be a quarterback at this level. Well, that's the same way with Pryor. But with Gibson, it's not so much mechanics like it was with Pryor. Gibson, he's a guy that makes plays as a quarterback throwing the ball with his feet first too often. It's a broken play where he makes something happen because he's such a great athlete. That's the one that I would compare. Burrow, I got to go way back in time. I look at a guy, Joe Germain is somebody Buckeye fans will remember as far as a pass is concerned, but he just moved better. Burrow can move. He can run. They can have the complete playbook with Burrow. It isn't like they've got to say, well, we got to change the read option. We can't do as much of this. He can do it all. He may get 20 where Braxton Miller would have got a touchdown, but that's fine. He's going to be just fine in that area. Clark, I guess that there's nobody that really jumps out at me. I would probably look back to Kent Graham, big kid with a big arm. I'm not going to say he had an arm of Kent Graham. Kent Graham just could anywhere on the field he could make a throw, but close enough with Clark. Probably a little better feet than I would say with Kent Graham. That's what would stand out with me. Clark he's still a work in progress too, but he's just so young. I think it's really petty to look at the things that are missing, and when you're talking about a kid who hasn't even stepped on the field yet, hasn't even gone to practice yet as a sophomore. That's the thing with Clark. I love the kid's upside. Bill mentioned something earlier. The only real negative about Clark is got some real nice quarterbacks on the board for next year, 2016, some guys that I like actually better than these guys that we have this year. And I don't know if they're going to be looking, they see a kid in 2017 already committed. I think that might impact us. That's the one real negative I would say about Clark.
Bill, as we get close to wrapping things up here, what changed for you over the weekend? Meaning, who impressed you that you changed your opinion of them? Who said some things that make you think they're not going to Ohio State or they are going to Ohio State? Just kind of bring us through the weekend of any noteworthy stuff on that level.
Well, I'll get back to what I originally said. I think the biggest change for me is just not that my outlook was bad, because it wasn't. I've steadfastly said Ohio State is going to end up with an outstanding recruiting class, but I think just the change in that I think people that are following Ohio State recruiting are very, very much more upbeat about things right now. They're reading what happened over the weekend. They're reading what these players are saying about Ohio State. They're looking at, hey, these are great, great prospects, and Ohio State is right there, and in some cases, a number of cases, probably the favorite to land those prospects. I think it's the whole atmosphere of the outlook, the positive feelings now about Ohio State recruiting for 2015. I think that's the biggest change. And, as far as individual guys, Jay Sean Cornell, his visit to Ohio State couldn't have gone really, I don't think, any better. I think going into the weekend, most people felt Ohio State maybe had a shot but probably not necessarily a great shot, and now they do. Justin Hilliard and Ja'Shawn Cornell together at Ohio State, that has now become a very, very realistic possibility, and that would be quite a coup for Urban Meyer. And when was the last time Ohio State got a great player out of the state of Minnesota? I guess you'd go back to James Laurinaitis.
Not Chantrell Henderson.
Not Chantrell Henderson. And, Laurinaitis was not necessarily thought of as a great, great prospect coming out of high school. He just turned into a great, great player at Ohio State. So
he was committed to Minnesota.
Yep, he was going to go play with Marion Barber. They were buddies.
So for Ohio State, and to get a great one out of Cretin-Durham High School, one of the bastions of prep football in the United States, a great, great high school football program, that would be a tremendous thing. The Ohio State made great strides over the weekend with some great, great prospects.
Duane, I'll give you the last word. What changed for you over the weekend, and where does your optimism or negativity lie going forward?
I think you have to look at getting these guys, really focusing on. I think what we may have seen is the staff has finally said, okay, here's our guys, and we're going to go get them. You look at the turnaround. We heard about Cornell some time ago. Bill had a report on him out of the blue that nobody else was on top of more than a year ago, I think, and it looked like we had a shot there, and then he disappeared, and now we've got back in on him. Turning the corner on Hilliard, Damian Harris moving his announcement date up. We're talking about 3 top 100 players. That can change a recruiting class. Just those guys alone. If nothing else happens, if we could get those 3 guys, and they seem to want to go to the same schools, and that comes down to Ohio State and Notre Dame, really. And right now they're coming off this visit, and landing those 3 guys right there absolutely blows the top off the recruiting class. We come out of this weekend looking good with those guys. We got back in on a guy like Tim Settle. I don't know how far that's going to go, but it looked like we found another gear and kicked it up a notch, even though it seemed like for the longest time now we have not been what we would, it's not what the intensity we've seen out of Urban Meyer and his staff over the first two recruiting classes. I just love how we came out of the weekend that good a shape on 3 top 100 players. You can't ask for anything better than that.
Can't ask for a better way to finish the show. We thank Duane Long and Bill Kurelic for joining us. Hope this satisfies the Roundtable Jones for you Bucknutters and gets your recruiting fancy held up. We appreciate you joining us. Went a little long, but it was a pretty big weekend. Thanks, Bucknutters.